I was going to talk about my mom and dad today, but I can't because every time I think about a story about them, it's almost like I choke up, I tear up. So I want to talk about another person who's near and dear to me, my auntie Sheila. What I loved about my auntie Sheila, an aunt on my maternal side, is she was just a woman who loved life. She lived her life as she pleased, and she did not concern herself with what other people had to say about her, at least to my knowledge as a child growing up. When I grew up in a day and time when you had to use the word auntie. You didn't walk up and say Sheila. You get your hand slapped. You would say auntie, or if you have an uncle, you had to use uncle before their first name. Different generation these days. But the legacy that Auntie Sheila left me, who has transitioned, who has passed away, is when she passed away, she left a will. Sidebar, we all need to have a will. So nothing's contested. But in her will, Auntie Sheila gifted all of her nieces and nephews, there are 9 of us, with funds from her estate. Because of my Auntie Sheila's gift, I was able to put a down payment on my house after I divorced. I had enough income, salary, to pay a regular mortgage payment, but because of Auntie Sheila, I had a down payment on a home. God bless you, Auntie Sheila. Listen, you are listening to About This Life with your host, Anne Marie. Conversations on About This Life celebrate becoming new again by letting go of mindsets that bind us and healing wounds that trigger us so that our mind, body, and spirit can thrive. Conversations reveal how people decide to change their lives just by shifting a thought or belief and taking action. It is my pleasure to welcome Julie. Hi, Julie.
Hi, Anne Marie. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Julie, I know part of your bio is that you left corporate, you decided to make that change and you had the opportunity to do that. You are working on a memoir, some of your life stories, and you even have your own podcast. We will talk about all of these things, and especially at the end of our conversation here, we will talk about your podcast and its purpose and what it does and who you're trying to reach and who you would like to listen to as you host conversations. I wanted to get started with, is it a game? I don't know if I can call it a game. Okay. So, Julie, you with me? You with me? You
Yeah,
game?
I'm game. Let's do it.
Okay. So, my first question to you is, I wish someone would have told me, and I will give you an example of how I would answer the question, and then I'm going to just let you start your story.
Mm.
I wish someone would have told me that your view of your parents change as the season changes. Your turn, Julie. What do you
Mm.
wish someone would have told you?
Wow, that's such a good question. Uh, well, speaking of parents, I guess I wish someone would have told me that your relationship with your parents can heal after they pass and can change and continues to evolve.
Julie, what do you mean after they pass? I mean, like they're no longer here. So, so do you have conversation with them, or what do you mean after? How can you heal after they pass?
That's a good question, Anne Marie. Well, so what had happened to me was that in 2020, in January of 2020, we found out that my mom had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And so I went out to Los Angeles to take care of her. And I was there for 10 weeks, the last 10 weeks of her life. And one of the things that had always been hard for me with my mother was that she was very OCD, very neurotic. And as a result of this, she was also very controlling. And I realized that she was so controlling because she was so afraid. So when I went there to take care of her, I, I never taken care of anybody who was dying before. And the very first night of my visit, and they live in a very small house, it was 800 square feet. The very first night of my visit, sitting in the kitchen, watching my mom get ready for bed. She always got ready for bed in the kitchen, brushed her teeth there, washed her hair in the sink. These are all her little things, right? So I'm watching her, and she gets done, she goes over to the stove and she grabs the knobs for the burners, and she rocks back and forth while she touches each set of burners 3 times, exactly 3 times. And I'm looking at her and she looks over and she says, I know I'm OCD, but this is how I kept the house from burning down all these years. And what my relationship transformed in that moment, because all of a sudden I had this compassion for who she who she was and how strongly she believed that she needed to do these little rituals to protect us. And because of that, the rest of my time there, it didn't matter what she did. I just had compassion. I didn't have any of the irritation that I had had when I was growing up. So, not that I necessarily have conversations with her, although I actually do, but I
Mm-hmm.
see
Mm-hmm.
her, I see her like whole and complete and not afraid where she is now. I see her at peace. And I've had dreams where I've seen her. I've had dreams where she and my father have both talked to me. And to continue along this theme of the transformation after they pass, my father passed almost a year to the day in 2021. He had gotten COVID and he was on a COVID ward for several weeks. And then shortly thereafter, he went into care and had congestive heart failure and he passed. Now, my relationship with him was more difficult. He was not always a very nice person. He could be an
Yes.
abusive
Yes.
person. Caring for
Yes.
my mother in that house with him there was very challenging because I didn't like the way that he treated her. And I didn't like the way that I still was triggered by his angry outbursts, even though now it's like, well, he's an old man. Nothing's going to happen. But I didn't want to,
It's triggering,
I
and
didn't want to be
you
there.
still feel like a child sometimes, even though you're a grown woman.
Yes, exactly. But after he passed, I had more compassion for him too, for the things that he had gone through as a small child. And like you were talking about your auntie Sheila, well, because of my parents, they left me and my brother an inheritance. And because of that, I was finally able to leave the corporate job that I hated. I was an
Hmm.
insurance underwriter, and it was a very
Hmm.
micromanaged environment. So now I have so much more gratitude for them, for everything that they did, for knowing that they did the absolute best that they could. for us as kids. And yeah, so that's probably a very long answer, but
Oh, I love that answer because in your answer, I found some gems, Julie. For example, you mentioned moving from irritation to compassion. And it's like when we're small, we're irritated by the things that our parents do because we don't always understand them and their history because we don't know their history unless they tell us or a family member tells us. And in terms of the way they are. And so you have to consciously make a decision to have compassion for that person.
mhm.
So you gave us a moment when you saw your mom and you began to have compassion for her in terms of, her touching the burners at the stove. How do you have so you have a mom who was controlling but then your dad was angry. So and correct me if I'm wrong, it's this absence of nurturing. Um, did you not have that, or did you have like an adult or another family member where you were nurtured as a human being?
I did feel very nurtured by my mother. Yeah,
Okay, okay, good.
yeah, in every way except her protecting us from my father because he was
Mm-hmm,
violent. So
mm-hmm.
in every way but that, we felt very nurtured by my mother. And my dad had his good moments too. But
Yes, yes,
yeah. But yeah, so
absolutely.
but I grew up with that saying, like waiting for the other shoe to drop, walking
Uh-huh.
on eggshells. You never knew what was gonna be the thing that would like set him off. And you
Mm-hmm.
you couldn't go to her for protection. And in the 60s and 70s, that's just what people did with their kids.
Yes, yes.
So
Understood,
yeah.
understand. How has having compassion for them brought you peace?
Hmm.
How has it brought you peace?
So much. I just have so much peace now. I feel forgiveness for everything that they did. And I was very angry but at them for a long time, for her for not protecting, for her being controlling, for his violence and his anger, and being able to forgive them. I'm not harboring that in my heart anymore. I'm not,
Mm-hmm.
and I always find that when I'm having a bad day or bad moment, or I'm thinking this or that isn't fair, I always try to go to gratitude.
Mm.
And
Okay.
gratitude makes your perspective just shift for me. It's just instantly, it just shifts. And so, and this might sound kind of weird, okay, but my dad, he kind of checked out, right? I mean, and I'm grateful to him. I'm not saying, oh, I'm so glad my dad died. It's not like that. It's just that my
Right.
dad was not happy. He especially wasn't happy after my mom died. He was just languishing in this care home, doing nothing all day, and he didn't want to be here. But if he had stuck around, the inheritance that my brother and I got, it probably would have been gone because of paying for care. Care is
Okay.
very, very
Oh
expensive.
my God, yes. That that's a whole nother conversation. Oh my God, yes. And
Yeah,
the burden of care fell on my brother. Yes, it's quite expensive. But go on.
right. So I have this vision of my mother, being up in heaven or wherever she is, right? Wherever she is, I know it's a good place. And I have this vision. So what happened was my dad fell. And unfortunately, my brother lives in Los Angeles near them, and I live in Ohio. But unfortunately, my brother didn't find him for 24 hours. And we didn't even know that he had COVID at the time. But I have this vision of my mother with her big, glorious angel wings going into the house and just saying, just kind of knocking him down and saying, come on, you're going with me. Let's leave some for these kids.
Oh,
You don't want to be here anymore anyway. So,
exactly. We are a light, you know? And isn't it so great that you can laugh? Um, we can laugh at the stories. Even though we still miss them, we can still laugh because we're coming from a place of peace at this point, you know. There are more things, and I was being very real when I say have conversations with them, because for some people they still communicate um, with people, even though they have passed on. And it's like, I think of Tabitha Brown, for example. She's, much the celebrity status and influencer. And she talks about seeing her mom, you know, every time that she sees a dime, it's something that reminds her. Grief is not restricted to the loss of life of someone. Like you mentioned, leaving corporate job. Sometimes we grieve end of relationships and the people are still alive. For example, divorce is an example of grief. So you have a podcast that you tackle these issues, and what are some of the things you have come to understand about grief?
Hmm. Wow. Well, the thing that made me want to start a podcast was that when I was, grieving my mom, and I would say I was grieving hardcore for about a year. I'm not somebody who cries easily, but I mean, I would just find myself randomly sobbing, uncontrollably for about a year. And I learned really the main two things I learned. One of them was that the thing that healed me the most was being able to talk about it, like as much as I needed to talk about it.
Mhm.
And the other thing was that I didn't run away from the grief. I just knew that I just kind of, what is that saying? Run toward the barking dog. It was like, you know what? I'm gonna have to go through this. So I might as well just go through it. And the person that helped me, I have obviously, I have a great support system.
Mhm.
And friends and a wonderful wife, but I had an end of life doula, and I really want to just praise for end of life doula and hospice workers, because
Yes.
she was not, I didn't know there was such a thing as an end of life doula when I was caring for my mother. We were very isolated because of COVID and and everything, but I felt like I was being an end of life doula because I had a very brief stint as a birth doula, and I'm like, well, this is exactly the same thing in reverse. Anyway, I got to talk to this woman, Roxanne. I got to talk to her it was
Mhm.
part of her internship in becoming an end of life doula. I got to talk to her every Sunday for an hour, and I would tell her my stories, and she was the one who encouraged me. She's like, you need to tell these stories. These are amazing stories. I wish I
Oh,
had every one of those conversations recorded in a podcast because they were amazing.
yes.
Right. But
Yes.
between that and just going toward the grief, that was what healed me. So I thought if I could start a podcast and talk to other people about the same experiences or similar, that I might be able to offer some healing in some small way to other people.
Some healing. What's the name of your podcast?
It's called The Hidden Gifts of Loss.
The Hidden Gifts of Loss.
Mhm.
Okay. Just love that. Uh, Going back to your mom for a moment, what's the most important gift that your mom gave you? And that can be a tangible gift, or that can be abstract, I thought. What's the gift that your mom gave you?
Wow. There's so many. Okay, there's so many ways I could answer this question too. I mean, one of the things my mom gave me was that she always believed in me and she always encouraged me and she always praised me and would just say like, you're so smart. I don't know how you do these things. I was the first person in my family to graduate from college. So, she she acted like she was kind of in awe of me, right? Which was really, I mean, that's a really good feeling. Of course, you're like, well, it's my mom, she has to say those things, but no, she really believed it. The other thing, my mom loved to give gifts, to the point where it many of us in the family had to say, you need to dial it back a little bit because there's too much coming to us for Christmas and whatnot, to the point that her garage was filled to the rafters with like big bins of gifts
Mhm.
and memorabilia and oh my gosh, she had every pay stub going back to 1959. I mean, it was just crazy. But
Mhm.
but so many people were touched by all these gifts, and they literally were hidden in the garage, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And after my dad died and we had to sell the house, um, I felt like my mom continued to give because we had this huge garage sale. Well, everything we couldn't, sell, we gave away. But I saw all these people come into the garage sale, and they were all going away so happy with whatever little thing that they had gotten for so cheap, right? And I thought this is what she would have wanted. She wanted everybody to have the perfect gift. And she did that even after she was
Yes.
gone.
And I always look for the spirit to appear, Holy Spirit to appear in every conversation. And so what my spirit is telling me is maybe she felt, and this is my interpretation, a sense of powerlessness in protecting you, yet the gift given was her way of expressing love, of expressing care, of expressing that you are dear to me. And so to be able to give other people gifts. And I dare say she's in awe of you, not just because she's your mom. I wonder if she wished that maybe as she see you, this young lady blossoming into your adulthood, if she wondered what her life would be, you know, if
Mhm.
she had made different choices.
Mhm.
So that's what I feel in my spirit. My kitty cat is up here trying to grab and be part of the conversation.
Oh, I love
Um,
it. I have a cat too.
yes. So my next question is, what gift did your dad give you?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is that my dad made me very strong, you know, because you had to be, you had to be really tough. And if he had not been who he was, I feel like that I would not be the person that I am now. It makes you're scared as a kid, but then it makes you brave later because you're like, well, I got through that. I could probably get through anything, you know?
Yeah, you can get through anything. And here's the lesson from that experience as well, because we go back and we reframe what has happened to us, is that there are some things that you can let go of.
Mm.
Like dad made some choices, and you don't have to choose that way.
Oh my gosh, you definitely just hit on something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. And you know what? That is so spot on because I had this, I definitely had this anger in me, as a young person and as a young adult, because it was not something that we were ever allowed to express, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I would feel this anger. It would just rise up, especially when I was in my first marriage. It would
Mm-hmm.
just rise up. And I said, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to raise my
Yes.
kid that way. I don't want to be in a relationship that makes me feel like this. So it was definitely a guidance to make different choices.
It's like it's a path to what we need to let go of. So I'm thinking of the listener who might be stuck and they're thinking to themselves, "Oh, my parents were this way, my parents are that way." Sometimes it's time to let go and understand our parents were human and that we can now make a choice as adults of giving ourselves what it is that we need. So,
Mm.
having said that, Julie, what gift do you give you?
Mm.
So, we talked about what mom gave you, we talked about what dad gave you. What gift do you give yourself to celebrate yourself?
Oh my goodness. Oh, wow. So, well, so this year I gave myself the gift of losing 40 pounds.
Okay.
Um, and I just decided to go for it. Like I wanted to start a podcast 3 years ago before, like right after my mother died. And I was working on this memoir and I had this idea I was going to start a podcast. It was going to be, Let's Talk About Death, I think is what it was going to be called. But it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
until I met Stacey Lauren that I kind of got up the courage to just go for it and just start that podcast. So
Mm-hmm.
I think this year I did a lot of, I did a lot of dares, you know. Um, I entered this memoir writing contest that I had always wanted to enter, and I had the opportunity to travel a lot. Um, I have been known to buy myself new clothes, probably more than I need.
No such thing. There's no such thing.
Yeah, and just yeah, just to have, live life to the fullest, really, as much as I possibly can. Because like the one thing that you really learn from loss is that you tomorrow is not promised, you know?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Tomorrow is not promised. So what are we going to do with our lives today? How are we going to leave the world a better place than when we let than the way we met it, leave it better than before we came. And I guess that is what makes us a good human, you know?
Yeah.
So and in this conversation, I think the important thing to realize is that we can laugh
Hmm.
after our loved ones have passed on, and that if we were to see their lives through the lens of compassion, that as adults now, we can see them, we can love them, and we can have love for them. And it doesn't have to be parents, it can be whomever
Hmm.
has been in our lives.
Yeah.
Okay, so closing remarks. What would you want to say? What would you want people to know after this conversation?
My goodness. Um,
I come
wow.
up with them. I just live in the question.
Yeah, you just asked the tough questions.
This is
Wow.
who I am.
I think it makes me think of like maybe what I would say to like my younger self, right?
Mhm,
Is to just really just to go for it, you know? If you think, oh, I don't want to do this thing, it's going to take too long. Well, the time is going to pass anyway, whether you
mhm,
do the thing or not. So, do it. And like, I would say also just to like young women. I know when I was a young woman, I really struggled with like body image and things like that. And just to know, you're just perfect the way you are. You're beautiful
yes.
the way you are. Enjoy your youth because it's not going to last. Don't
Yes.
don't stress about little things. I
Mhm,
see so many people getting caught up in just the little things, and those are just the details. At the end of everything, I think that what really matters is like, it's going to sound cliche, but really it's like love, right? It's like who we love.
yes.
At the end of the day, that is the most important thing, is having those people that are near and dear to you in your life, and knowing that they're safe. If you have kids, whenever my daughter's home, I'm just so grateful that she's right here and I can hug
Mhm,
her.
mhm.
So yeah, just don't take anything for granted and just love as much as you can with what you're given.
Love with what you're given, and I would certainly agree with that. And having gratitude for life as well. Tell us the name of your podcast one more time.
Okay, it's the hidden gifts of loss.
Okay, so Julie and Trina, I want to thank you for being my guest today on About This Life with your host, Anne Marie, where we are changing our lives one day at a time. I
Oh,
hope our listeners, yes, get something really, really, really good from this.